So you already covered a lot of the really important things from 7.2 in lecture on Thursday, but I wanted to do a couple more examples for you, including exercise 7.2.1. We did skip over this section, but in the very rare and pretty much impossible scenario where we have sigma and we don't have mu, so we'd like to estimate our real population mean, but we somehow have that population standard deviation, which, as I discussed in class, doesn't really make any sense because the formula or the calculation for that population standard deviation is this, which actually has a mean in it. So there's really no case where I'd be trying to find the real mean, but I somehow have the real standard deviation. But that aside, if we actually have true sigma, we should be using a z interval. So the most important thing for everything for 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, the rest of this section of the lecture notes is to really make sure, was the value given to me a sigma or an s? So to read through this exercise, we have a publishing company has just published a new textbook. Before they decide what price they wish to sell the textbook, they want to know the average price of all textbooks on the market. So here's our big key, average price of all. This is our key that we are looking for, an average, and it's for everybody. So this is our mu. It's the population average that we want, or population mean. The research department at the company took a sample of 36 such textbooks. Woohoo, we just got an N. And anything that comes in the same sentence as this sample size, as the word sample, has got to be from that N, and collected information about the prices. Well, that was a letdown. This information, okay, so don't know why we stopped the sentence, but the information produced a sample mean of 90.5 or $90.50. So that is our sample mean. And then our last piece here, and this is the most important, it is known that the population standard deviation is $4.50. So two good keywords here to tell us this is real deal. Population standard deviation, the word known, and also that population standard deviation made it real obvious. So we have 4 questions that come after this. The first 2 are basically a little bit of hand-holding. What you would normally see on a test would be the last 2, but we'll work through all of them. First question says, what is the point estimate for the mean price of all such college textbooks? And remember, we have 2 ways to think about this. One is if I had to estimate the mean price for all textbooks, I would just use X bar. The other way to think about it is to remember that our confidence interval formula breaks down into a point estimate and a margin of error. So our point estimate is just that X bar. No calculations necessary here. The second question says, what's the standard deviation of our sample mean? So if we go to our formula sheet, the standard deviation of a sample mean is right here. Sigma divided by the square root of n. So we can go ahead, we know the standard deviation, sigma of our sample mean is the real population standard deviation divided by our sample size. So 4.50 divided by the square root of 36, which I believe is 75. I'm going to be lazy and assume that's right. Okay, so the next 2 are the real questions, the ones you're going to see on the test. Construct a 90% confidence interval for the mean. So I know we have the formula right above us on this page, but I want to show us what it's going to look like on the test. So I'd bust out my formula sheet. I would go, okay, look, I want to do a confidence interval. I want to do so for means, so I'm going to use one of these 2. But oh, I have sigma. So in this case, this is the formula I'm going to use, X bar plus or minus Z star, just to remind us how this formula sheet's going to come in handy on the test. So we got X bar plus or minus Z star times sigma all over the square root of n. So our $90.50 plus or minus some margin of error. Our 90% Z star we're still going to get from our good friend the t-table. 90% Z stars of this bottom row. 1.645 is what we're looking at. 1.645. And we can either just throw in the 75 cents, or let's pretend like we wouldn't actually have this on the test because that previous step wouldn't have existed. So it would look something like that. And if you're doing this by hand, you guys know I like to do my margin of error first. So I would do 1.645 times 450 divided by the square root. And obviously I know what the square root of 36 is, but I just want to sort of show you in case it wasn't something really easy like that. So 1.23375. Normally I like rounding to 4 decimal places. Here with that 5 at the end, it's always funny whether you round or up or down, and there's like rules if you're in a chemistry class. So I just will keep them here, and then I would just do my addition and subtraction with the whole number. So minus that answer and 90.5 plus 1. So we got 89.26625 up through 91.73375. And then the last piece, we need to be able to write a 1-sentence interpretation, and we know how that's going to start. We are 90% confident. Now, we didn't have a very good sentence here to help us out, but we can go ahead and do this, that the true, or how about we use the wording of the question? Let's use this. We wanted to know about the average price of all such textbooks in the market. So we can say we are 90% confident that the average price of all such textbooks on the market is between 89.26625 and 91.73375. As I mentioned in class, 2 big changes from before that we need to make sure of. You do need some word in here that says mean or average, just like before in part 6 we needed some word like proportion or percent to say what the heck parameter we're estimating. And then it's also nice to have a word, in this case like all, that tells us that this is the population or true or actual value. So those 2 pieces are necessary. And then when we're talking about averages, you do have the additional piece of there should be a unit associated with whatever we're measuring. So those are the 3 sort of things you want to check for. We need to be talking about the real deal value, what that value is of, and then put some units on there.